So for this video, I'm going to be going through each of the green improvement cards and kind of giving them a review. Now I say kind of because if you've seen any of the other videos from this series, you know I don't actually provide like a numerical score or a rating of any kind, because honestly, I don't want to tell you guys what to do. You guys are smart enough to figure it out on your own. So instead, I want to talk about whether or not I think they're good currently in Constructed and or in Draft, and why I think they're good. I want to talk about what the cards do well, what they don't do well, and maybe if they're not good, what they're looking for, right? Because some of these cards are the kind that may not be amazing now, but if another set is released or some balance changes occur, then they could shine. So anyway, that's the caveat. So let's go ahead and dive right in, and we're going to start with Mist of Vernis. This is a great one to start with because it is a great card. This card is very, very good right now and will likely be good for some time because it can be played on the first turn. It is a 3 mana cost improvement, and you can play it across lanes, and it is a snowball card. It is the kind of card that helps you to win a lane and then keep winning it. It represents increasing your clock. It is good. So what it does is it modifies all allies, so this is your creeps and heroes with +1 attack before the action phase. Now modify is important because that means if this affects your heroes and they die and they come back, they keep those buffs until they're purged. And for the purposes of creeps, this can again really help you snowball and push a lane. The fact that this is an improvement and can be played cross lanes is even better, because if you have this in your hand on the first turn and you play this cross lanes, it can start snowballing right from the first turn, right away. This is a very, very good card. It has been known to win games kind of on its own, if you will. It is certainly something you want to prioritize in Draft. It is certainly something that sees play in Constructed right now. It is just that good. It is worth the investment. So yeah, Mist of Vernis, just good and Constructed, good in Draft, probably good for a while. The only time that this ends up losing value is in any sort of meta where the snowball effect takes too long to develop. If, for example, we end up finding ourselves in a hyper-aggressive meta where things are ending on round 3, so think of it as like mana turn 6 or less, because it is possible to lose faster than that. This is the kind of card that actually could diminish in value, because if it's only going to be worth +1 or +2, there are other cards that you can play and get immediate value in that regard. But right now in the current meta, that's not the case. Things are a little bit slower, and it looks like they might be that way for a while. And as such, something like this is going to see value. So, okay, now I've talked enough about the obvious one. Let's move on. Path of the Dreamer. Path of the Dreamer is not terrible. Most of these Path cards are not in a position right now where there are enough quality single color cards to support playing them on a ultra competitive level. That's the way I'll word it, right? That being said, of the Path cards, Path of the Dreamer is one of the better ones. Giving your tower regeneration, specifically if you can even do this 2 or 3 times in a game, can be a pretty big deal in terms of swinging things back in your favor, or at least slowing down somebody long enough for you to capitalize on it. The fact that it is after you play a green card means that this triggers when you play it. So really, in order to get good value out of this, you probably just play this card and then naturally play 2 other green cards in the lane where this is. And because of that, it makes this card actually attractive. I don't think it's good enough right now in the current meta to support playing in Constructed, mostly because the current meta is either hyper aggressive, in which case this is too slow, or it's very combo oriented where they, drop a million things and blow up your tower in 1 or 2 turns, or even in the case of like Mono Blue, which is pretty popular right now, a lot of times that's just like chip damage and then they hit you with like Bolt of Damocles. So in that matchup, this could maybe help if you're regenerating enough that you're keeping yourself out of Bolt of Damocles range. That might be a big deal, but it's a little bit slow there. But in draft, I think it has a lot of potential to shine. Specifically in any draft where you're ending up running like 3 green heroes and enough cards to support it. But even in the case of a 2, right, like a 2 green hero setup, depending on the cards and your heroes, this could be decent enough, at least good enough to potentially see play. How do I want to word this, right? It's not a card I would prioritize, right? Like, you're not first picking this in a pack, but you're not necessarily upset if you have to run it. As I said, because it's after you play a green card, you do get the trigger when you play it, because you're going to play it, and then it's after you've played the card, so the wording kind of, you know, shores it up there. So even by itself, it's essentially like play this card and, you know, gain 3 health on your tower. But long-term value, you know, especially in draft, right? Like, if you can get 9, 12 health out of this, that is a big deal on a tower for slowing things down. Places to look for this in the future, as far as constructed goes, if we get a lot of really high-quality green cards, this could rise in value if you start seeing the potential for like a mono green deck. Another place where this could see some value is if green ever makes its way into a true drag the game out control style deck. Like right now, blue green is the combo color, and then straight like mono blue is like the drag the game out style deck. But if there's ever a blue green one, using something like this to regain your tower health while also blowing up the board and stalling could become a legitimate strategy. Not necessarily enough, I think, right now to warrant running it in constructed, but it's something to keep your eye on. Next up, Unearthed Secrets. What to say about this card? This card is good. In fact, there were many times in the closed beta where people were like auto-including this as a 3 of. I think people have kind of rightfully dialed that back a little bit, you know, to like 1s and 2s of, but it's still very, very good. The reason it's good is much the same reasons that Mist of Vernis is good. You can play this in the first turn, and it can really help you snowball in a game. And this goes for both constructed and for draft. So what you're looking to do with this card is, Mist of Vernis is a card that you can play in the first turn, and you try to identify a lane that you're looking to win early and then snowball. This is the opposite. You try to identify a lane that you're likely not going to win. You might not lose it right away, but you're not likely to win it, and you're going to try to just stall the lane out, but you know you're going to take steady, consistent damage from that lane. So you put Unearthed Secrets there, and you start drawing cards, and it's like a one-sided draw an extra card per turn. Now, the reason this has been, at least in constructed, downgraded from a 3 of down to a 2 or 1 of is that a lot of times, even just having one of these active is enough extra card draw to kind of dig through your deck, and you don't want to have too many of these because you're just, instead of playing impactful cards, treating this like a cycle. Not that cycling this card is bad, but there are better cycle effects that exist that also do something for you. This is just like an initial cycle with long-term growth potential. So it's still very, very good. In draft, it can be amazing where there's a lot less improvement removal. It's amazing because those games are often value-oriented, and you actually can occasionally run out of cards. I personally don't find myself running out of cards in draft very often, but I do know some people do. So in this case, I would, you know, much prefer to have something like this. I don't think this is typically like first pick material in draft, because you want cards, in my opinion, that help you win the game early on. So those are high-powered heroes, good finishers like Thunderhide packs or emissaries or things like that. This card is helpful, but by itself, especially in something like draft where you're not looking for combos, you're just looking for value, it's not going to help you win the game by itself. So I don't think it's early pick potential, but it is very good. You're not unhappy if you're running this in draft and in constructed. I mean, we've seen it in the We Play tournament and some of the other tournaments. It does make an appearance, so it's good. Good. All right. Altar of the Mad Moon. This card is interesting. 4 cost improvement. Allied melee creeps have +2 regeneration. Oh, how good this card would be if it was just allied creeps and not melee creeps. So that is something to keep in mind. This only saves your melee creeps, but sometimes that's good enough, right? Specifically in draft. This doesn't see a lot of play in constructed right now because usually if people are blowing up your melee creeps, they're doing it all in one shot and not giving you the opportunity for them to regenerate. I'm thinking about cards like At Any Cost and Annihilation. This does not help against those, and you do see those in constructed, so this just right now doesn't see a lot of play, if any at all, in constructed. But in draft, this can be really valuable. A lot of times, properly identifying lanes to push and kind of going with the flow of the river is a good way to just win in draft, and this helps you kind of slow push a lane in that regard. And it combos very, very well with some of the other common cards that exist. So this card goes way up in value in draft if you draft Dimensional Portals. This card goes way up in value even if you have to play the, Call the Reserves. Better Late Than Never isn't exactly a great card, but if you do get stuck running it, this can help you get extra value out of it. Basically anything that's going to help you with melee creeps. If you have drafted a Prelix, and you can put this in a lane where a barracks exists, you can really make somebody have a headache because the inevitability in a lane like that is very, very high. So this card is, again, kind of like some of the other ones I've talked about, not necessarily a high pick, right? You don't pick this, first or even your, second round of picks in a pack. But if you have to take it and you have the right cards to support it, it can really shine. It's not necessarily, a game-winning card on its own. It's not the sort of card where you want to be running, 3 or 4 of them. But, as a 1-of in draft, maybe as a 2-of if I've got, like, a bunch of Dimensional Portals or something, it can really stand out and make a difference. So it is playable in draft, not really played in constructed because of the number of ways to nuke a board right now. But, yeah, Altar of the Moon. Not bad. Stuff that might make it more palatable and constructed in the future would be obviously a bunch of additional cards that spawn melee creeps, but really you would need cards like At Any Cost and Annihilation to fall out of favor because, again, the regeneration doesn't matter if your entire board just dies right away. So, alright, Cheating Death. And this is the new Cheating Death. I'm filming this post-patch, so Cheating Death is now a 4-cost improvement that has an active ability, and it says active of 1, give a unit a death shield this round. May only be used if there is an allied green hero in this lane. This card is not as good as it used to be for preventing your big board from dying, but it can still be useful in trying to snowball a lane, in terms of, saving key heroes or potentially even key creeps, right? Like if you're really trying to protect like a Thunderhide pack or something, or if you expect an Annihilation, you can, if you have initiative, use this preemptively. This card is still not useless, but it has fallen in value pretty significantly. I think that this card is much worse overall, but potentially better in draft because of your ability to pick what you get to save. And because in draft you're less likely to run into At Any Cost, you're less likely to run into something like Annihilation. The potential for picking the unit that you save, I think, is I think that is more impactful, or has the potential to be more impactful. Yeah, Cheating Death is interesting now. It's really early on, and it's hard for me to judge exactly how good or how bad this is. Thus far, it's kind of disappeared in constructed. I think the general consensus is because it doesn't do what it used to do, and that's save your board from Annihilation or At Any Cost, it's not worth running anymore. I personally kind of agree with that assessment because those are very, very popular in the meta, and you need cards to combat them or you need to race them. And right now this card does not do either of those. But if the meta were to ever shift to being something more mid-rangey and a lot less like, hey, I blew up your entire board, this card could make a comeback. If there was ever also a meta where you could get multiple activations from an improvement, whether that's through some hero that gets printed or some other improvements or anything weird, then this could potentially rise in value again. But right now, in its current status and printing, it's having a hard time finding a place in the meta for constructed. I do think it's still worthy of being ran in draft. Like I said, the absence, or at least the less dense, we'll say, appearances of annihilation and at any cost make this card just more valuable. Again, if you can like play a Thunderhide pack and then keep your Thunderhide pack alive, if you can even just keep some key heroes alive, if you manage to draft Abaddon. So here's the thing about this card, right? If you can draft an Abaddon and a Cheating Death, Abaddon is one of those green heroes that kind of like just doesn't die. Enchantress is another great example. Either of those two, if you have them in your draft and you manage to snag a Cheating Death, you can basically make it so that you lock down a lane, because your green hero in that case is not likely to die unless they've already got a big nuke or something anyway. And once that's not dying, you can use Cheating Death to save another priority target, and you can really start to push. So those are some cards you might want to look to pair this with. It is not like first pick status the way it potentially was in the past. This is something that you'll want to pick up later in a pack, if at all, depending on your draft hero ratios. If you don't have a lot of green heroes, it's probably not going to be worth it to run this unless it is, like I said, Enchantress or Abaddon or some really hard to kill green heroes. But I do think that this is still worthy of being ran in draft depending on your tools available. There, Cheating Death. It's a little sad how far it's fallen with one balance adjustment, but there we are. All right, so we're almost done, gang. Home field advantage. This card is the winner for the coolest animation in the game, in my opinion. I love the little dude coming over and disarming. In terms of playability, this historically has not seen much play in constructed because it is random. If this was something like before the action phase, disarm the highest attack enemy so that you knew consistently what it was going to hit, or maybe if it was disarm a random enemy hero again for consistency, then I think this would see a lot more play. But because it's random enemy and this has the potential to just hit a creep, doesn't see a lot of play in constructed. It does see play in draft, and in draft it can generate a lot of value. Even just disarming creeps, again, as you may have realized is a bit of a theme with these green improvements, that is something that can help you slow push a lane. Green's identity in draft is typically one where you kind of just camp and you try not to die, and you just slowly but surely win a lane over time because all your stuff isn't pushing fast, but you're also not losing units, whether you're saving them with the altar, or they're ramping up in power with Mist, or you're protecting them with Cheating Death, or in the case of home field advantage, disarming enemy units so that your units don't die. Whatever the case may be, green is just great at stalling. Again, heroes like Treant and Enchantress are great at protecting your allies as well. So this just fits that mold. And yes, it can hit melee creeps over and over, but if this thing lands on like a bounty hunter, especially one that's procced its Janata, you're gonna be very, very happy. And it is annoying to deal with in draft, at least annoying enough that I do think it's worth running. Not high priority first pick material, but a couple of picks into a pack if it's there. If you're running heavy green, go ahead, pick it up. I think it is entirely worth a slot in the deck because it is that annoying to deal with, and it does generate some value in draft. Oh, well, real quick as well. This also could eventually make its way into constructed as we talk about things that you want to look for in the future. If they print a bunch of cards, or at least more impactful cards that are based on enemies disarmed or something like that, right? Like if you get, either cards or heroes with activated abilities or whatever the case may be you know, improvements. If you get something that says like destroy target disarmed enemy or something, and this gives you a reliable way to disarm something, and then you can start picking them off, then sweet, this might rise in value. Or if you find other things like, you know, something gets combat bonuses based on number of disarmed enemies or blah blah blah, right? Like basically, because this does something pretty unique in that it disarms enemies, that's the kind of keyword you want to key in on, right? Look for other things that interact with disarm in the future, and then maybe it'll rise in power enough to creep into constructed. So the last improvement is Salameh's Favor. Simple, straightforward. Your tower has +2 mana for 4 mana. This card is really good. It sees play in draft. It sees play in constructed. If you've played any other card game before that involved resource manipulation, mana, magicka, whatever, you know that ramp, that's an old Magic term, but ramp, meaning increasing your resources so that you can play expensive stuff faster, is powerful. It's a very powerful effect. Like, there's a reason that cards have the costs that they do, and it's because they're balanced around a certain pace of the game, and the later the game goes, the cards ramp up kind of exponentially in power because there's this level of inevitability, right? So the faster you get to that level of inevitability, the more powerful your effects are going to be. This helps you get there. This one is very interesting because it is an improvement and you can play it cross lane. You can, on mana turn 4, play this from, you know, the first or the second lane into potentially the second or the third lane, and then immediately get the benefit. So anytime you get plus mana effects like this, it lets you use that mana right away. You don't have to wait a turn for it to refill, if you will. So being able to jump up to, you know, from 4 to 6, or potentially on some turns, right? Like if you play one and you play another one, you could go from like 4 to 8 in the last lane, play something ridiculous like an Emissary or a Time of Triumph. It's very, very powerful, and it's good in even something like draft because you can play things like Thunderhide Pack faster. This card is it's kind of a staple, and you should expect to see it. Now, it's far more powerful in constructed because you can guarantee that you include cards that take advantage of the ramp. It's still very powerful in draft, but if you're playing it in draft, there's a couple of things to consider. One, how many late game bombs do I have that I'm trying to ramp into? I've had drafts, for example, where I legitimately drafted like 3 Thunderhide packs. So yeah, jam in as many Salameh's Favors as I can. But if you only have like 1 late game bomb, I wouldn't go necessarily overboard on Salameh's Favor in terms of like picking it very high in your packs. You have to, and this is a bit of a trick, properly assess the value of this card at any given time based on what you've already drafted. Picking it very early in a pack might be worth it if you have a lot of late game bombs. If you don't have late game bombs, but you see this here, then you should probably draft the powerful cards as opposed to this, because again, kind of like I was mentioning with Unearthed Secrets before, it's great if you play cards that enable or facilitate other strategies, but you have to be able to close out the game. So if you have all these tools, but they don't do anything for you as the end result, right? They don't help you actually close out the game, then it can be a wasted spot. So I'm saying this, I'm providing this warning so that you don't draft like 4 Salameh's Favors because you've drafted them or picked them very high in packs, but then you just have nothing big to ramp into. But if you get lucky and in your first couple packs or even your first couple picks, you pick up, you know, a pair of Thunderhide packs or something like that, then you might want to start valuing it higher if they start showing up. That's kind of what I'm saying. This is one of those things you have to go with the flow a bit with, kind of gauge how your draft is going. As I said, in constructed, you're doing the deck building, you know what you're trying to ramp into, you can make it happen, Captain, and just take advantage of it. In draft, takes a little bit of finesse to figure it out, but you know, you're smart. I have faith in you. So anyway, that is it for the green improvements. If you made it this far, listened to all of my rambling, you're a saint, and I appreciate you. And I hope that you'll stick around maybe sub to the channel. I'm horrible at reminding people to do that. I need to get better at selling out. But yeah, maybe sub to the channel. Maybe you'll watch the next video. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.